Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 20th, 2019 Downtown Design Review Committee meeting. Always as a first order of business, please ensure that your cell phones are turned off, and we will start with roll call.
Anthony Blatt. Corey Bates.
Present.
Gary Jones.
Present.
Julie Kriegel. Present. Deborah Richards. Present. Mariana Sador. Present. Rosie Trujillo. Present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get into everything, do we have any potential abstentions or time constraints? Okay. Okay, so moving on to item number 2, approval of the minutes. I assume everyone's had a chance to review the minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move to accept.
I'll second.
That was a Kriegel-Richards motion. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Minutes are approved. Item number 3, we have no cases withdrawn. Item number 4, we have no continuance requests. Item number 5, the consent docket. We've got a couple projects listed on the consent docket here. Do we have any, would anyone in the audience like to speak to the consent docket? Okay. Do we have any consideration of the consent docket? I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we move for approval of the consent docket.
That was a Jones-Kriegel motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the consent docket is approved. So moving on to item 6A, item DTCA 19-00007, 18 Northwest 6th Street. Is the applicant present? Okay, we'll have staff present the project, and then the applicant can present as well.
This is for a hotel project that the committee first heard in February. It's on 6th Street, just east of Broadway. The revised design in your packet is substantially different from the one you saw in February. I believe it has picked up a lot more of the massing and vocabulary of the nearby automobile alley and the brick warehouses around the railroad tracks. So almost all the issues from the last staff report have been addressed. The only issues we picked up in this one is that the percentage of exterior insulation and finished systems is technically more than what's allowed by the guidelines, but most of that is on the interior courtyard portion that faces south, so you can't see it from the street. And the programmatic organization of the lobby at the ground floor with the garage has changed quite a bit, which results in less active use on the ground floor. But I'll wait and have the applicant present to you why that's the solution.
And if you could start with your name.
Good morning. My name is Ronald Keith Smith. I'm an architect and architectural engineer. Work for Mays & Associates, located at 14850 Quorum Drive in Addison, Texas. I am the studio director. We kind of specialize in hotels. We've been honored to do several dozen Hilton and Marriott projects over the last few years, and we are very excited to be able to bring this customized Marriott Town Place suites to the market here. How do I click? Okay. The The site is a very unique site. It was surrounded by parking lots when we started this development process. The Heartland building is now occupying the hard corner at Broadway and 6th. The Gemological Institute, which is in a historic building, it was one of the first to be renovated after the bombing incident, is located next door. We have talked to both of those people, and they're both very excited about a hotel coming to this location. In designing this hotel, we took into consideration that we're in Oklahoma City, we're in a very large brick environment, the urban context, the density, and what we're doing. It also happens that 3 of the main partners of the firm developing this are all OU grads, and they operate half a dozen hotels in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and this is their first venture into Oklahoma City, and I do not believe it will be their last. We looked at inspiration from what's going on in Bricktown, what's going on with the city, very excited about the new trolley system and the artwork that's going on throughout the city. And like I said, the developers have a very strong background of what's going on in this community. We're not in Automobile Alley properly. We're just adjacent to it. We're not technically in Automobile Alley, but we're really hoping to be able to take advantage of being able to walk to Broadway and be able to get on the trolley. A hotel is not fighting against the urbanism that they're doing. We're contributing to that. We're bringing guests that will use those restaurants and use those entertainment venues, and hopefully it will be a reason to stay on 6th Street instead of other places in the city. The site has been vacant and been used for parking for a number of years, as is the lot next to it and the YMCA parking garage behind us on 5th Street. Rand Elliott's firm here in town has developed a very elegant Heartland building that is currently being constructed next door. Probably will be a year or more to build, and it is very complementary to what we're doing. We've talked to them about the relationships between our building and their building and how we can make this a strong pedestrian path. As you can see from the picture here, there's currently no sidewalk going down to the railroad tracks, and there's over 6 foot of fall from the beginning of my lot to the end of my lot, making some things to do on the first floor difficult because of the grade change of the street. We're going to be putting a very elegant 8-foot sidewalk and making this a very strong pedestrian path. This is kind of a cartoonish overlay of the scale of the building to the adjacent Gemological Institute and how we are right up on the street and producing a strong urban image for the neighborhood. Hopefully there'll be some strong buildings going across the street over time. We have redesigned the building fairly significantly for a variety of reasons. Part of my job is to get a lot of different people to agree on how we do things. The ownership, the developer, the city, Marriott, all have a very strong say. This was very important to the developer. We're doing this great outdoor bar on the 4th floor that kind of looks towards Broadway and should have a great view line of the action and activity that's going to be presented on Broadway. And of course, the Heartland building is going to be across the alley from us, making this side of our building more of a pedestrian path, not so much a vehicular path. We do go downhill, and between us and the railroad track, there's really not much development or activity on the street. There's currently not really any pedestrian path this direction. Like I said, there's not even currently sidewalks on these roads, but we're hoping to make that dramatically better. The Gemological Institute is here, and we're doing some street trees and a big 8-foot sidewalk. The city has already agreed to let us have a passenger drop-off zone in the city street. We'll be leasing that land, and our Canopy will overhang right up to the street edge, and we've gotten special permission from another city board to do this. The rear alley is where our utilities are, and the side alley is just an alley between us and Heartland. We are going to be putting some seating out in front of the hotel on our property adjacent to the right-of-way, and we're going to have some metal planters with some bamboo, and we will have some trees along the streetscape, enhancing the environment from its current condition. We really want it to be a strong presence on the street. However, we do not have very much street frontage. We're going to put some landscaping along this part of the building, our utility vault, some trees. This is our passenger let-off area. We're intentionally designing an area where we can do valet for certain events. I think a lot of our guests will probably arrive by Uber or Lyft, although we do have parking for 111 cars, and we only have 111 guest rooms. We are meeting the city's parking ordinance. This is just kind of some imagery from our design team showing what the front door with our overhanging the street area, the lighting, and the light, bright, safe environment we're trying to create to draw people into the hotel. Hotels are different than most other types of development in that we produce people for other restaurants and bars and people they're at our place because that's where they're staying, and it produces an opportunity for other businesses adjacent to us. We are going to have a 3-story volume on one side of the building where we're working on coming up with the correct solution for Oklahoma City for some big public art that's going to be a dedicated feature to this side. And we have done some blade signing for Marriott versus Marriott's kind of cookie cutter signage to make it kind of a special location for Oklahoma City. We are hoping to get our signage approved. I know that's not what we're talking about here today, but this is the type of signage we see wanting to have. This is our 3-story volume where we're looking for a public mural or a piece of artwork that we're going to be working with some local people here to define. This bar on the upper floor, it's a very strong presence to the street as something that I think will be very, very well received by Oklahoma City. The hotel market here is very good. You are short a whole bunch of hotel rooms. You need more hotel rooms to be able to do some of the things that you're wanting to do with your convention center and stuff. This is another view showing the access between us and the Gemological Institute. We are putting real windows on the first floor in these areas, even though they're parking garage, because we think it makes for a much stronger presence for the building. And then our jump lobby, which is something we've done in Houston and a few other big markets. People come into the hotel, they go up the elevator, and immediately they get off the elevator, they're directly across from the front desk, so there's someone to greet them. And then we have great views from the 4th floor, looking out over into the city, and all of these windows on the 4th floor, basically the hotel lobby, looking out down to Broadway, looking out onto the urbanism that is this part of town. The Heartland building's going to block a little bit of my view, but we're still going to have a good view the other direction as well. We are planting some street trees and some bamboo and some planting along the street. In the shaded areas under the building, we're also doing some dedicated planters with bamboo. We may be able to do some more of that. We're looking into the possibilities. Our address is 18, so we're thinking we're going to put a big 18 on the building so people know where we're at. We think that's very cool. This is just a little imagery of some of the night images that we've studied. We're still working on the overall lighting design, wanting this to be a bright, safe environment. These are kind of the required pictures that show the parking garage. Did I miss one? I think this is the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor, and then we get to the 4th floor. We have the lobby. As you zoom in of interest, this elevator only goes from the parking garage to the lobby. So if you come in that jump lobby, you can't go up to your room on the 6th floor. You have to cross the front desk, see the Marriott staff, and then use the other set of lobbies. There's the possibility that we may let guests use card access to these elevators once they've been checked into the hotel. We're anticipating having a nice bar which will give a strong activity level on the corner. Unfortunately, the Heartland building also has a lot of landscape on this corner on this end, which is going to give us good line of sight looking out to Broadway. Exercise room, meeting room. Town Place by Marriott is not a big convention center hotel. It's more of an extended stay hotel. They have bigger rooms than they like people to see. They like people to stay multiple days. A lot of times they're booking people where medical doctors are coming into town for 5 days of training, and they want to stay at a nice hotel with a lot more space, and this is a lot of the market that they're driven. You don't have as many extended stay hotels here in town as you do just normal hotels, so we think there's a market here that will be very strongly received. We're also looking at the bar area here of having a glass wall that kind of folds away so we can bring the outside inside on the really pleasant days. Yesterday was a very pleasant day here. We sat out on a balcony at another restaurant, and you have a lot of good weather that will enable this inside outdoor activity. Again, this is our patio area that you see from the outside images, and the ability to open that glass wall up into an opening into the building. On the other side, we have a small outside patio off our exercise room and large windows off of our exercise room. We are not doing a cookie cutter interior on this project. The client has hired an interior design firm that we do a lot of work with, Studio 11 out of Dallas, and they're picking colors, textures, and materials that are unique for this hotel in Oklahoma City. This is kind of a jump lobby image from the Omni in New York. Again, some details, some inspiration image of what we're trying to achieve inside the hotel lobby with Studio 11's help. Some outdoor furniture issues of what we're trying to do outside. And just some strong imagery of the palette of colors that we're going to be incorporated into the interior building design. I realize that doesn't have as much to do with the outside, but we like to look at a holistic project. The floor plan is a pretty uniform floor plan. These are a little bit bigger than typical Town Place by Marriott rooms. The ownership group has invested additional funding, and we're not doing window units. These closets on the edges here are what we call vertical P-tacks. So you don't have that image of an inexpensive air conditioner hanging out under the window. We've stepped up the design, and we've got some suites and some 2 bedrooms and a few patios where these are custom rooms that we designed special for Oklahoma City. The design is largely brick on the bottom 4 floors with numerous ephes elements on the upper tower. A little hard to read in the black and white images. I think it's easier to see this in the perspectives. Also note that it's a C-shaped building, so the inside of the C you don't really see from any of the street, but it does seem to have these same pilasters and colored materials that we're using. We have a material board down here. This blue brick with iron spot in it is a very modern-looking, cool brick that we'll be using these 2 colored bricks, and these are the colors that we have presented to Marriott for their approval. We've used this on another project last year, and it was really well received. Again, the view from the northeast corner, so Broadway is a block up. We're a little bit off the action, but we think that because we're the type of hotel and the scale of what we're doing here, it will be well received on 6th Street. This is the northeast view. Again, strong street connection, high urbanism design, right out on the street. This is facing the Heartland building. Again, putting in real windows versus just openings into our garage to increase the pedestrian path scale a little bit. Really think that the drop-off zone and people going into the lobby will be very well received. We have some grade challenges. Like I said, from this corner to that corner, the street goes downhill almost 5 feet to get underneath the bridge at the railroad tracks, which imposes a little bit of challenges, but I think we've worked through that with Cedar Hill Civil Engineering here in town. Has done an excellent job, and we've already got our drainage and our utility work pretty much approved by Public Works. It's an exciting opportunity. I'm here to answer any questions. This building's been through a couple of rounds of redesign between the developer and the scope of the project and Marriott, and this is the exterior images we'd really love to get approved today so we can move forward to our next steps. I'm here for any questions.
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Like it seems like before you had more the lobby, more activity on the ground floor in a previous solution to this project. So I'm curious why you chose the jump lobby format over another one that might have been also a solution.
There was a multitude of reasons. When we did that original design, we got pricing on what it was going to cost to build that parking garage, the waterproofing it's difficult to build a parking garage over a lobby and keep it waterproofed. And then we had to scale the project back, and it was a lot more, we felt by moving the lobby up and getting the views, it solved a lot of the items that the client and Marriott wanted to achieve. And having all the slope on the site created some exiting problems as well. And we really, being able to park on grade works better for the overall concept and the comfort of the people. We've done this jump lobby several places. People come in, they go to the hotel, and they need that personal reception from the front desk. And we think we'll be able to achieve that here with this jump lobby.
Yeah,
And we have all this parking behind us that we can't use.
Yeah, no, I've been to several hotels that have a jump lobby, and I agree that it functions fine for the visitors. I was just curious if there's a way to get more activity on the ground floor, and I was wondering why, if you had a solution before that worked with the ground floor, why you chose to implement the jump
Yeah,
lobby.
we scaled the project back after looking at the first design, and it made it a lot more contextual to the urbanism that's here, and everybody felt this was the best solution.
I've got just two things I want to clarify, just so everyone's aware. There were two items that are not included in the scope for approval. One, the details and specs for the proposed canopy over the drop-off area, and two, the feature art wall on the north facade. That those will be submitted separately.
Yeah, the concept for the canopy is obviously here, but materials or dimensions aren't specified. I expect that would be administratively approvable, but it'll need to come back. Ron and I were talking, the concept for the art wall could be any number of things, and much later in the project, we expect that to come back to committee. I also wanted to clarify something. Ron said the size, style, and location of the signage that's in the renderings is in your staff report for approval, and if that changes, we'll work through how that.
That's our intent, is what we're showing is what we're wanting. If it was to change, we would come back.
Sure. Okay, so so the signage is part of the approval right now?
Yes, because as shown and presented now, it meets regulations and guidelines. So.
Well, I'd like to say that I think it's a nice project. Certainly seeing the process of where this building was to where it is, I think there's a number of improvements that have been made. And I appreciate your work with staff to get to this point. I think the use of brick as well is a good move. And then the fenestration, the muttons on the windows, tying that to Automobile Alley, I don't think that showed up as well in our packet as it does in some of these renderings. I guess I would say I'm maybe indifferent on the jump lobby. I see the functional benefit to it. It's an urban solution. As far as the activity on the streetscape, there'll still be cars and people coming in and out of the building with that solution. I do want to touch on the amount of EFS on the building. So what you guys have right now is well above what the guidelines permit. And I know that it's been described that most of it is within the courtyard space. But I believe that south elevation will be visible given the height of the building. And it somewhat showed up when you dropped in that axon on the site. You could see how much taller it is than the parking garage to the north, and that south elevation will be visible, at roads down the way.
Well, we're kind of counting on that too, because we have big windows at the end of the hall that are looking out towards downtown.
Was there any consideration to cladding the southeast and the southwest corners in brick, similar to the northeast and northwest corners for the full height of the building?
We did study that at one point in time, and we originally had a lot of windows in the stairways and things in an earlier design. And the developer kind of wanted to focus more of the richer materials on the sides that were going to be seen by the public more. Therefore, we have more brick on the front side and on the Heartland building side than maybe is required, and we have a little less on the alley side between us and the less desirable Fifth Street garage.
Sure, and I completely agree that the north side is the priority, but that south side will be visible as well. I think it'll be experienced by the city a little bit more than maybe people are anticipating.
And I think it's a very pretty building on all sides. I mean, we've got fenestration on all sides in that C shape, and what we're doing there is going to allow for great views of downtown, and I think it will be well received.
Yeah, and I have no issue with the window sizing and the window placement. I think that all stays. It's more of the cladding of the facade around the windows. If we could scroll to, back one image would be great. Or keep going back. One more, right there. So you can see on the right side of the image, the south side, that those towers on the corners are just all EFS. And then inside the courtyard would be all EFS as well. And again, you guys, there's more EFS on this building than the guidelines allow. It's, so you're already in that realm. So what I'm talking about is this right here on the right, that southwest tower and then southeast tower, simply cladding it in brick, similar to on the left side of the image, the northwest tower. And if that was considered, or if that would be considered?
It could be considered. We actually did a study and showed that, and the development group wanted to focus more on the front and do, like we did that big inverted C on the front, and we have additional brick there. And of course, this is all metal stud and EFS, where the parking garage is concrete. So the weight of all this also plays into it, that we would have to go to brick tile or something, or the structure has to be really boosted up. And in the stair tower, it requires a lot more stiffer walls. That we would prefer to get approved as we presented today. If this is a sticking point, we're willing to discuss it and see. But I think that with the different colors that we're using and the relief that we're using and the lighting that we're going to be providing on the building, I think that you'll be happy with the imagery at the end of the day.
Well, I would be happier if there was more brick. And I don't see it any different than the way you've constructed the northwest and northeast corners from a constructability standpoint, stud framing and brick cavity wall. I mean, it's you're doing it on the upper levels at the north and the north side. So what I'm trying to get to is a middle ground, really. Again, as designed, this building has more EFS than the guidelines allows. So I'm trying to get to a middle point where everyone's comfortable with this design relative to the guidelines.
And you're talking about this corner here, this face?
Yep.
And then this face to the windows. So just kind of the anchored corners like I've done on the other side.
Yeah, so that corner to,
This
really
face.
just to the reveal.
And this face to the reveal line.
Yep, and it would be that corner and the southeast corner as well.
I think we can work with you to make that happen.
Okay. I think that'll give the building, it's a very symmetrical building to begin with. I think that'll help emphasize that symmetry, and then it'll give it a little bit more richness when it is viewed. That south
Well,
facade.
and it will balance it a little bit because then you kind of have the two bookends.
Yep. Do we have any other questions for the applicant or consideration?
No, I was just going to say I appreciate the changes that you've made. Really do. I think it's a good step in the right direction. I have concerns about the activity on the first floor. I wish there were going to be more with the completion of Central Exchange and that food hall that's going to be added to the north and east. There will be a lot of activity on that street, I think. And so, yes, I wish there was more going on. However, I like the trade-off. It's made in the staff notes. There's a trade-off that the building will be 7 floors as opposed to 9. And I think that with the 4th floor patio, there should be, hopefully, that will be utilized and there'll be a lot of activity there. So I'd like Deborah's opinions on Corey's comments about the cladding. Since I'm not an architect, I'd like some other architect opinions.
Yeah, I agree with Corey's comments about the cladding. It makes sense to me. I mean, I don't know if that brings you to the 50%, like brings you down what Corey was suggesting, because there's like a certain percentage that it's not supposed to be equal.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't, having the brick on all sides of the building that goes up to the full height will
Yeah.
really improve the appearance.
Having it as solid corners on the four corners will create a bookcase effect that will strengthen the image some. Because we drew it that way once.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this project, if you could?
Apparently, I came to this meeting with just my sunglasses. But they are bifocal, so I'll be able to read my notes. My name is Jane Jenkins, and I am President and CEO of Downtown Oklahoma City Partnership, and I am here to represent the board of the Automobile Alley Association through the Automobile Alley Association Design Committee. We, too, would like to express our appreciation on behalf of the applicant for really sharpening their pencils and going back and working with us on what we consider to be a better design for this project. We are excited about the opportunity for there to be a hotel in Automobile Alley. Right now, we do not have a hotel in the district. And I'd also like to clarify that you are in Automobile Alley. You're not adjacent, you are in Automobile Alley. Our boundary goes to the east to 235. So you are a part of the Automobile Alley district, and you are going to have activity on either side of you to the west with the Heartland building, which is going to employ a great number of people, and then just under the railroad tracks, the Parlor project on the north side of 6th Street is also going to attract a great number of people. We had some initial concerns about the jump lobby also, as well as the what that would do to street activity. However, we agree it is the best solution for the building to get it to where we want it to be. It's also a very urban solution. And so with people have to get to the ground floor to get in and out of the hotel and to get in and out of the bar area, which would be open to the public. So, you know, we're convinced that that could be shouldn't diminish too much of the street level activity that's there. We do have a couple of design suggestions. We would echo that of Mr. Bates about the cladding on that, because we were concerned about the ratio of EFS there. We would also suggest that you maybe look at matching more, making the EFS maybe a little bit darker, not so light, so it might match more the brick that you're doing. A couple of opportunities that we'd like to make you aware of is that Automobile Alley does have a a sign grant for neon signs, where we can contribute to a neon sign. So should you want to do your exterior signs, as you said, you're kind of getting away a little bit from the Marriott cookie cutter and doing something a little different and do some neon or some LED outline there, then we might be able to have a little bit of money to help, toward that. Also, since we won't have any ground level retail, we also wanted you to think about maybe putting a piece of lighted artwork in the jump lobby that might make more attraction to the street level and activate the street a little bit more. Through Downtown Oklahoma City initiatives, there are some monies available for partnerships for art pieces. If we could get this considered public art, because if it's visibility to the street, then you might qualify for some assistance there. And also, just a suggestion on the alley side of the building, which is the west side of the building, maybe looking at some ivy or some landscaping to to be more similar to and complement more the outside of the Heartland building, which will be to the west. Again, we'd like to thank the applicants for their vigor in getting a new design done, and your comments are important too. And just so you know, we did ask staff to come meet with the design committee for Automobile Alley to have a discussion about this, and then it also went to the board so that there could be, public process and they know what's going on. And making sure that the applicant knows that we welcome the addition of a hotel to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the assembly that would like to speak to this? Do we have any more discussion or any other questions?
I just want to make another comment about the windows facing Northwest 6th Street that look into the parking garage. And I think that the windows are great. It's a good solution, but we've seen this before. And I kind of think that in general, if we do have windows, in some cases where they're facing the parking garage, then maybe the applicant can be encouraged to put some art or other things behind those windows. So I do think that the windows are a good solution, but to create the appearance of more depth, that those could be treated in sort of a unique way. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that you necessarily need to address that right now, but for the future, and looking at a car is also not like the best view. So, and we did have another case previously where we had a similar situation to this. So maybe when people are applying, we can suggest that.
Yeah, there have been a few projects in the past couple of years that did like the window mullion, but didn't actually put glass in it. And now that several of those are constructed, I think they're less than completely successful. So I can't wait to see that I was glad that it was proposed this way, and my feeling is it will read more black, like the office building.
I think it does benefit slightly from the way the grade drops off. The windows are there, so from a building appearance, it looks nice, but your eye level if you're walking by, you're not looking directly in at a car because you're a little bit lower. I would actually I would also emphasize the way the lighting is.
Right there.
Yeah, I would also emphasize the way the lighting is. What fixtures are selected and the way they're laid out in that garage will be very important because from a line of sight standpoint, especially at night, you're going to be looking up into those windows from ground level, and really the lighting in that space is going to be the most dominant feature that you see. I would emphasize that attention be paid to that from the exterior experience of the lighting.
Okay. Those are good comments, and we're still working on the lighting design.
If we don't have any more discussion, I will entertain a motion, and I would simply like to remind the committee of the comments about cladding the southeast and southwest corners in the brick.
So when we make a motion, could we suggest that portion can be staff approved? Or
Yes, if you want the material change, put it with the condition, and that's all we need from there. We'll record it. We'll ask for an updated drawing to include with the final paperwork.
I will entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Okay. So I will move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the downtown design district zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the exception that the applicant clad the southwest and southeast corners of the building with brick.
I'll second.
That was a Richard Jones motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Application is approved. We appreciate you working with us.
We look forward to working with you on additional steps.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that is the only case for individual consideration. We have some other business in Section 7, so we'll start with 7A, 900 West Main Street. Is the applicant present? If you could, staff will present the project, and then you can present as well. Please.
I'm sorry, I didn't even ask Lisa, did you want to present? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get into that one. This is a request for closing a block of the road right-of-way for Fred Jones, as well as a piece of an alley, which we tried to market in that. And so at this area, you're probably familiar with the developments that happen, and we have the mixed-use developments that are going in with the multifamily that's across the street, where previously there was a closure for that piece of Fred Jones a few years ago to allow them to build across that. They also have on this corner is another piece of that same project, as well as down in this quadrant and this quadrant. So it totally surrounds it. And then we have the music venue at this corner, and then we have the 21C Museum and Hotel at this corner. And so all of that ownership is involved in the request that you see today. They've indicated that they're wanting to be able to control what goes on and have outdoor activity in this space. In the staff report, there was some concerns expressed by staff dealing with the fact that we have a currently existing functioning alley. We have trash that's picked up in the alley, and if when you close something and it gets vacated, they can control the access. So if the access were controlled, and you still need the access for other property owners in the alley for deliveries because there's overhead doors, then you're looking at the possibility of people having to back out of the alley, which doesn't make sense. The half a block to the north, which is on Main Street, those lots do not have direct access to the alley because of the buildings and how the buildings are constructed. On the south half of the block, all of these do have direct access currently to Sheridan, from Sheridan to the alley because of the buildings are smaller. And so this is a little unusual. We don't normally have recommended conditions when a CE comes through. Staff worked with legal to try to come up with the wording, and so you can see that we're recommending that it be approved with conditions dealing with allowing the city and adjacent property owners to be able to still utilize that. And then obviously we always have the requirement for utility easements have to be, that usually is later, but this stuff came up now, and so we don't normally have all of this in here. So there was discussion about all of this. Currently, the projects are almost totally completed. There is parking on the street. The sidewalks are in. All of this is going on, and so I think with these conditions, there's the possibility that this is a win-win, and it could continue to have, there's a lot of activity going on. I'm sure a lot of you in here are down there for eating and for different things, concerts, that type of thing. So, and I'll kind of turn this over to Lisa, who has been working with legal on some of this stuff.
Mr. Paul Lefevre can tell us
Yes.
more about it.
Go back this
Paul Lefevre. With me today is two representatives from the applicants, Clay Moss and Megan Holsheiser, and then the engineer has been involved in the project, Terry Haynes. They're available to answer any questions also. This is a step in the larger project here of these West Village apartments and 21C Hotel and the Jones Assembly. This particular application follows extensive discussions with the city administrative officials, so I believe it's been well thought out, and we have a recommendation for approval from the staff report, which we appreciate. We can certainly discuss the conditions that they're suggesting if you wish, but we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, in discussing those conditions, what is your position or opinion on those?
Well, I would point out, and certainly very interested in what your council has to say here, but a closing ordinance, once we get all the way through to city council, grants effectively no rights to the abutting property owners. So the property owners would have no ability to grant easements to anyone because they have no rights there. Once this project would go to what's commonly called a vacation action at district court, there is a reversion at that point, and certainly we will need the municipal councilor's office signing off on any journal entry there, and that would be the appropriate time to figure out wording and just exactly what needs to be included in a journal entry of judgment that gets recorded in the county clerk's office as to just what needs to happen here. Just for knowledge here, state statute requires that utility easements be protected and easements reserved. So that's just a normal part of the district court process. Nothing special is needed there. We've had extensive discussions with our neighbors to the west as to their needs. They're not objecting to anything. They've not requested easements, but as we go through this process, every intent is that they've got to be able to have the waste pickup there too, and as part of the journal entry, when we get to the vacation stage, we'll work with them more and make sure that we satisfy the municipal councilor's office that everyone's been taken care of there. I think the key thought here is the ability to, from time to time, to close off the street and a portion of the alley here to allow special events to occur. But for that, there won't be any barriers, and it'll remain the same. And with the utilities here, et cetera, there's no, unless someone was to relocate everything, which isn't practical, there's going to be no construction on top of this. So does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thank you. With regard to closing the right-of-way, if there were to be any development on that area in the future, that would come through a typical permitting process and would get seen.
So who will own the alley and the street there?
Well,
Yeah, go on.
as through the municipal closing process, through an ordinance being approved by the city council, ownership has not been affected. And the abutting property owners, their ownership rights are unaffected. They have no more right to that alley or street than anybody else. Now, as part of the vacation action in district court, which would happen subsequent to the ordinance, there is, as a byproduct of that vacation action, a reversion of the street and the portion of the alley in question to the abutting property owners. And so at that point, they would own this little piece of the street and the alley, and hence the reason why state statute requires reservations of easements for all the utilities in place and in use, and certainly anything that's additionally necessary, we'll figure out working with the municipal councilor's office at that point to include, and we'll bring in the other property owners and make sure they're happy with what has been proposed there. So I'm just suggesting that as part of a closing process, this is greatly premature, but it will all necessarily be addressed at the district court stage.
So the applicant will be responsible, and when it's all said and done in the closing, the applicant will be responsible for the street maintenance.
Oh, yes.
Street light maintenance, because they'll be the owners, so they'll be responsible for it.
I mean, we've seen a lot of situations where cities have closed down streets and they're pedestrian and they do other activities there, and those seem like really positive situations. So I don't have a problem with, what you're going for. I'm just wondering, but I don't know what the ownership is like in those other situations, and if you, and although you're not planning on building anything now, I don't, it might change, in 20 years. So I'm just, I guess I don't really know what the correct path is. So I would be curious to know what, when I see pedestrian streets with lots of activity like that, where they don't need permits for, to do activities, what the ownership, rules are and how that's worked out. But maybe through this process, that will all come up. I don't know enough about it.
Well, I guess this site's unique because there are two owner entities, two LLCs that own the surrounding businesses, and so they will jointly own this.
But I would want it always to be like a public space. Like, there were some comments in the staff report that we shouldn't be making mega blocks, and I totally agree with that. And I also very much support just public, pedestrian streets that have been closed with new activities. But I imagine that the ownership is set up in a way where it could never, something could never be built there, or it would always have to be that way. So I'm just curious. I don't know how that looks.
Well, you are correct that sometime in the distant future, it's possible for things to, an owner to want to change the status quo. I think we'd end up being right back here with a proposal to demolish or build a big structure on top of this. I think everyone involved would have an opportunity to participate in such a decision. But what we have right now is a very substantial investments in the 21C Hotel, the Jones Assembly, 4 new buildings associated with the West Village Apartments, and this, what I'm going to call a public space here, functions to tie these things together, and it's an integral part of the project. And so I think for the foreseeable future, certainly in my lifetime, this is what we're going to get here. Yes.
Just for clarification, so I understand what we're accomplishing here, we're providing a recommendation to the Planning Commission so that we provide input based on the guidelines by this group as they move forward and making recommendations to the City Council. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
And I want to say, we, as Laura was mentioning, we did unusually add all these conditions. We've had various conversations with Paul and Municipal Counselor's Office about what those could be and if they're appropriate and when all this stuff happens in the process. But because downtown has this guideline about connectivity and not creating super blocks, I felt it was important that we be on record somewhere, somehow, in part to establish what is unique about this site so that next month somebody doesn't come and want to close the space between their property and so on and so forth. So I'll defer to Susan if she thinks the conditions need to be included or not, but I'm trying to establish what the unique circumstance is.
Right. And I haven't had a chance to really talk to Paul directly. I know there's another attorney in our office who looked at this for me. I think what we were looking at also was that it was just seemed to be just a closing, and I was not under the impression for sure that you were going to vacate either, because if that's just a closing, then obviously that doesn't really do anything with the, as getting an easement and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was what we were thinking when we were making these conditions. But I would suggest go ahead and making these conditions for the Planning Commission, and we can get with Paul and work that language out before it goes to Planning Commission.
And we certainly don't have any objections to the spirit of the request. It's just at a closing stage, the property owners have no rights that they're capable of granting, but all those things will be negotiated with the Municipal Counselor's Office in the vacation stage and District Court, and I'm confident that we'll come up with language that suits the city in that document, and make sure that the abutting property owners are happy with whatever resolution is arrived at.
But to be clear, also, if they do vacate and it becomes private property, that is their property to do with what they want. And, at that point, it's no longer necessary or expedient for the public to need that. So that's the decision that the council would make, was whether or not this is necessary or expedient to close this street.
So I have two questions. First, if ownership gets transferred to the applicant and they're responsible for maintaining that street lights, everything, is there anything in place to ensure that that maintenance is consistent with how city streets are typically maintained?
Well, it will effectively become a private drive. And I think your protection here is just the best interest of the property owners abutting this site, is that this is the focal point where all these related developments all center upon. And so they have a considerable vested interest of having this as pristine as possible, because it's kind of the jewel in everything that they're doing here. So
I'm not making any suggestion that it won't be maintained the way you're describing. I'm simply looking for assurances that should things change down the road, that we have a street here that is typically used for public use but is maintained by a different entity. It's more of a long-term assurance that that road would be maintained at the same standards of city roads. I'm not suggesting that it won't be maintained very well right now. It's more of long-term assurances that I'm asking about.
Okay.
We agree.
Okay, and my question's been answered. I mean, I understand that it sounds like that is, from a city standpoint, maybe a little exposure. And again, I'm not implying that it won't be maintained. I'm just trying to vet through all of the associated issues with doing this.
I have a question, because in the staff report, it talks about noise. Comment was made, noise generated by the outdoor activities could also be an issue for nearby businesses and residents. Once ownership turns to these LLCs, there is no recourse, correct, for somebody nearby that might be affected by the activities?
Municipal ordinances affecting noise remain the same regardless. So there is nothing like that's possible.
Okay.
So my second question, my understanding is the desire to do this is generated by a desire to streamline the process for closing the street down for private events, I'll say.
From time to time, they'll want to have events there, and it'll be appropriate to close it off to secure pedestrians having a nice evening in the area, yes.
So as an alternate to vacating the street, is there an agreement that could be crafted between the applicant and the city to streamline that process? That if there's a desire to close the street for events, and to be honest, I don't know all the steps of the typical process with that, but could this be a condition where that process is somehow streamlined through an agreement to alleviate the burden of the typical process?
The city ordinances would need to be changed in order to allow something like that. Right now, it's a fairly cumbersome and limited opportunity to have street events. And in this case, I think we would exceed very quickly the allowances in the current ordinances, and I don't really anticipate a willingness to change ordinances just for this project, and then whether they'd be applicable to all the other projects that come up next or exist. So I'm hearing what you say, but I don't think that's a practical solution administratively here.
Is the hurdle so you had mentioned a threshold in the ordinance. Is the hurdle the process for doing this each time, or is the hurdle that the ordinance includes a cap to how many times?
Both.
I'm sorry?
Both, sir.
So the ordinance currently includes a cap to how often and how many times a street can be closed. Am I understanding that correctly?
For a special event, yes,
For a
sir.
special event, okay.
Do you happen to know what that is, by the way? Just curious.
From memory, I think we, in the pathway we're going down here, there's a limit of 3. There are some other options also, but I think in our situation, it would be constrained.
3 per year?
The limit is 3, but there are exceptions.
Yes.
I have to say, I don't really, I mean, the alley is one thing, and you can work that out with the owners of the other properties, but I feel skeptical about getting behind closing down a public street. Like, I think it should remain public. If it's a public pedestrian walkway, if it's mostly used for activities. I'm also fine with that, but it doesn't sound like there's any assurances that it will remain open for the public to pass through there. And nobody walks on Classen. Like, no one, I mean, that's maybe sometime in the future, like 50 years, that would be cleaned up where somebody might want to walk there. And then, you know, there's still a lot of potential development and stuff on the south side of, what street is that?
Sheridan.
And so I feel like people should be able to move through the block there.
If I may,
Like just walking. Like I don't care about the cars. I'm just concerned about like the people,
Yes.
the activity in it.
Yes, please. Okay.
John Michael Williams, I'm co-counsel on this case, and Clay Moss, who is the key representative of the applicant, can confirm all this, but the goal is to make it a pedestrian place and to have frequent street activities there. That's the goal. It's not to shut it down for pedestrian purposes, but it's to deal with the fact that there are limits as to the number of times that you can close a street for a street festival, and there's some other restrictions too that have turned out to be difficult. And so Mr. Moss has met with the City Public Works Director over a period of many, many months about how do we streamline this. And it was his recommendation, as Eric Winger, the Public Works Director and City Engineer, it was his recommendation, go and close the street, as opposed to trying to navigate through these rules that really don't fit for someone who wants to regularly make this a people place. Is that correct?
I cannot say it any better.
That's the answer.
I think we are all, I mean, when I look at what you're trying to do, I think it's great. We want activity there. It's all that. I'm just concerned about setting a precedent, and that every month we're going to have somebody else say, we want to close our street next door. And they might have valid reasons as well. So I'm really torn here because I see the vision and I love the area and I want you guys to accomplish that. I don't like our responsibility to set that and setting that precedent. That's my concern with this. So I'm really torn right now.
I'm torn as well. I mean, it's the same concerns, and I just want to reiterate that all the concerns we have are not specific to your application and your project. Our concerns are a more general perspective from the city as a whole. Like Julie said, setting a precedent that we don't want to set a precedent that negatively impacts our guidelines and the way our guidelines are approaching downtown. And again, while there's no direct concern about your application and what your plans are, and I agree that what your plans are great. I mean, I've seen this done in many other cities with great success. So I think the vision is there, but representing this body and the long-term general goals of our guidelines in downtown Oklahoma City, there's a concern about setting that precedent.
If the concern has to do with pedestrian access or use, that's something that can very easily in a journal entry of judgment when we get to the vacation stage be integrated into an instrument there that allows the public free ingress and egress within the context of a special event. And I think that with respect to a precedent here, the number of times that we're going to have such a substantial private investment literally surrounding this entire street and the function that this street will serve, I think is a very unique set of circumstances that I doubt, unless there's something else of this magnitude and importance, it might be of value then also, but certainly I don't see it as a precedent just for people wishing to close streets.
And I would probably disagree with you, because we have seen requests for street closures, and we don't take them lightly. And
Of
just,
course.
we understand that what you're trying to do is, really, the outcome is, I think, something we all are behind. Again, my concern is giving almost control of the street to outside groups. Ownership, we trust the owners right now. Who are they going to be in 10, 15 years, 20 years? Be nice if it's the same. There's no assurance of that. Again, I think we have to be careful and look at the bigger picture, as Corey is saying, as opposed to this particular situation.
Yes, please. If you could, yeah, we got to get on the record.
I just wanted to clarify, I emailed the experts, which is the staff at DOKC who put on special events. There's not a limit per se as to how many times you can close a street, as long as the property owners that are affected are in agreement, but there is a limit on other things that may have to do with how you're programming it, such as APL permits and noise permits and other types of permits that impact what goes on the street. But there's not a limit to how many times you can close it, as long as the property owners are in agreement.
And that was one thing that I had a question. So once it goes and closes, there's no need for any other permits for any kind of activities happening on that street. Is that right? So the owners can just say, we're going to do any kind of activity, any kind of party or block party or anything. They don't have to get a permit. Am I correct?
They would still have to get permits.
They still
for,
have
like,
to get a permit?
Some kind of alcohol permit or anything
Right.
like that. They
So,
would
okay.
definitely have to get permits.
Yeah, municipal ordinances
So it's still the same.
don't go away.
Right.
Just from a technical standpoint, am I correct in saying that as a body, we could provide a recommendation of approval, we could provide a recommendation of denial, and we could provide no action? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious, and I think maybe the planning department might be able to, or the planning committee might be able to address these issues better, because they maybe have more experience in planning. But what the agreements have been in other cities where you see closed down public pedestrian areas. I mean, I don't know that this is the best option. I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't even mind if this street, was designed differently, just to, complement the other buildings. They're all modern, there's a lot of things going. It's not about, even maintaining the look or anything, but just not taking away public space from the public. That's my main concern.
And I'm very confident that all your concerns about pedestrian access can all be addressed at the vacation action stage in district court, and we won't be able to proceed onward there without the municipal counselor's office agreement as to whatever's proposed. At this point, a closing ordinance does not grant any rights to the abutting property owner. We can't exclude anybody. We can't close it. We can't do anything. It's closed to public use until the vacation ordinance occurs. And I would submit that, there are some compromises, I believe, both necessary and appropriate when you have a downtown area like this that's developing. It's not going to be the same as it has been for the last 50 years, and that some changes in order to achieve the goal of pedestrian activities and use and to promote all those important things that the city seems to be focusing on, that this is, my belief, the appropriate step to take. We've had intense consultations with administrative officials. I think this can be any issues addressed at the vacation stage when there is actually someone has the ability to grant easements. We don't today, but we will then. And I think all these concerns can be effectively addressed.
Well, I don't know that we will be part of that vacation process. So
No, but your municipal councilor's office will be.
But if they don't care about the public.
Well, let me ask a question, because when we did the other part of Fred Jones, and it came through us, and we didn't have an issue with it, at council, an issue came up from adjacent property owners. And so there was a condition about putting First Street through from Fred Jones over to, I forgot what that next street over is. Okay, and so I don't know if that became a condition in the ordinance of the closure that then let the municipal councilor's office know at the time they got the district court document, they needed to look for that requirement. And I don't know if that's how this happens, and then everybody will be more comfortable with it, because I understand we're just making a recommendation, and closing is not the same as vacating. But don't we at some point in this process, if everybody agrees with the potential condition for vacation, it would have to be memorialized somewhere, I'm assuming. But Susan could disagree with me, I don't know.
It's generally in the journal entry. I don't recall what we did on that particular case, if we actually did that street first, but I know we worked with them on that.
Yeah.
But the recommendation from this body conditioned on the preservation of ingress and egress, the pedestrian use, reservation of utility easements. I mean, none of that is adverse to what we're trying to do. And if that helps alleviate any concerns about this, that can be passed on to the Planning Commission and the City Council, and they can effectuate whatever they want in an ordinance then.
Well, personally, while maybe not practical, the ideal scenario for me is that there would be a process to streamline what you're trying to do with the city without having to give public land away from the public. And again, it may not be practical in the context of this project and this specific application, but it may be warranted for future projects and future requests. And I don't see giving public property away from the public a necessity to accomplish what's trying to be done here. And it may not be practical, like you said, but it may be warranted.
And as been mentioned, extensive discussions with the city manager and the public works director, and this is the guidance that we're getting, that in this situation, belief that the action, that the circumstances here are unusual enough and specific enough that it warrants this particular approach and conclusion. And there's just, I don't see any appetite of ordinance changes, because those only affect the very broad perspective and starts creating rights for all the other situations that don't have the unusual circumstances that this one does. So I think this is exactly the point of why this process is necessary and merited in this instance.
Can we pass this on to planning with the recommendation that the applicant provide case studies in other cities of how the ownership has gone with these things? I just don't know how this works.
The ownership is, what they're doing right now is just closing this to public use. So then if they do go to vacate it in district court, that's when the ownership will change and they would own.
Well, if it's closing to public use, then I guess I'm against it. I'm not for closing the streets to public use, if that's what this is.
Well, what does closing the street do compared to vacating the street?
A closing ordinance in and of itself is just a procedural step that closes the street to public use. And no rights are transferred. It really just puts the whole thing in limbo and doesn't allow any use. Now, at the vacation stage in district court, which is a relatively straightforward process, takes about 60 days, that's when the reversion of ownership occurs, but also in almost every case, there is a listing of reserved rights, typically to all the utilities that have facilities in place. If there are property owners that have certain requirements, those are addressed in the journal entry of judgment. And certainly, if there are questions about pedestrian ingress and egress, that can be preserved by a reservation of an easement in addition. And the municipal counselor's office is quite capable of crafting, along with us, the protections that I think you're really looking for here, and it gets accomplished to everyone's satisfaction.
So I will say that is true as long as we go through the next procedure. You don't always have to go to the next procedure and vacate it. There's a lot of times people just close it. We have the absolute right under the ordinance to reopen it.
To reopen it the next week.
The street at any point that we wanted to.
So, Deborah, to your question about conditions and recommendations, I would say that a recommendation for approval could be made to close the street with the conditions that are listed in the staff report, and additionally, a condition that maybe avoiding vacating, with a
Maintaining some kind of public path through or something?
or with a condition that street vacation be avoided, or
The whole point of the closing ordinance is you're closing it to public use. So if you don't, you need to decide.
Well, but we're just making a recommendation anyway.
Right.
So I guess my recommendation would be to maintain a public path, and then planning
Yes.
will decide That will be an official report from us, and they will decide.
And Ms. Richards, that is, I submit, properly done by a reservation of an easement in favor of public ingress and pedestrian ingress and egress across this street, and that locks it in forever. I strongly believe that the vacation step is absolutely appropriate and necessary here because it provides the municipal councilor's office the ability to lock in all these reservations of rights that I think you all are seeking. So it achieves the goal that you're wanting, and I'm also confident that as we go through the city council process, that they can make their desires very clear to the municipal councilor's office of how to handle the next step, and it achieves everyone's goals here.
Susan, what are our choices? Approval, denial, or?
Or you can approve it with conditions, and you can make that a condition also, what we've discussed.
Okay. I guess my question was, what is the no action option?
You just forward it on to the planning commission without a recommendation.
And then,
Hi, Clay Moss, and so this is always going to be a public street. One of the, I don't know if you know the history, but Fred Jones is actually the grandfather of the Hall family. The Hall family, through partnerships, maintains ownership of 21C Jones Assembly Apartments collectively, and so it was a collective decision between those three folks. And candidly, they would always want Fred Jones Avenue to stay open forever. One of the conditions of closing this, you can actually do a special street sign, so it kind of commemorates their family history and the lineage. Fred Jones is already on, you'll see it all around over there, but point being, it's always going to be a public street. Candidly, one of the recommendations that was made to us by some of the city officials that they'd alluded to earlier is, you guys are trying to do all this unique stuff, and we don't have anything for this. So you got to go here, and you got to go here, and you got to go here. If we just close and vacate, you guys can do everything you're talking about. And so that was a recommendation. That's why we're proceeding down this path. It's always going to be public. In fact, we chose, it's hard, you can't see it on this map, but the main building that just opened on right up here to the right, we, instead of putting the main entrance to the residences on Sheridan, it's actually on Fred Jones. So everybody had to funnel on that street anyway in order to activate this street, because if you look in the past, it was a very inactive street. In fact, people just parked in it. And then one of the, Mr. Bates, one of your comments, and it was dead on, was maintenance of the street. When we had just, a plain asphalt street approved, and we all started looking at it and go, well, that's not exciting at all. What can we do to make the street better? And so we did a bunch of concrete. There's a great picture. You can actually see a brick paver we did in the middle of the street, and it has Fred Jones inscription written about it. And then also brick paver crosswalks, because crosswalks should be cool and they should be interesting and not just, paint that fades. And so we did all these things, and there is so many utilities. I don't know if you guys remember when we were doing the apartments, Fred Jones was ripped up for almost 18 months, I think, to put all these utilities in there. So I guess if something was ever going to have to be built over it, it would be maybe a Warren Buffett would come in and spend the money to move these utilities to build over it, but that's not the intent at all. But one of the issues we had is, okay, if you come in here and you make repairs in the street, they said, yeah, we're going to put an asphalt patch back. And we said, no. Let's not do that. We want to see the concrete and the pavers. And they said, great, you have to pay for it. And we said, hey, no problem. If you want us to even, put a pool aside or start a foundation or whatever to make sure that this street is maintained appropriately forever and ever and ever. That's the goal and that's the dream. It was just all these things that we had talked about, even the string lights and all the different crosswalks and access, and that was the whole intent of this whole thing. And so and even the stuff that we don't own, those neighbors, we talked to them. In fact, a couple of them said, hey, do you want us to come to DRC and help support you? And we said, no, we appreciate the offer, but they're excited about it too because they want to participate in some of these things. So I think it really will be we've realized how unique this is. This whole development is unique in a myriad of different ways, but it is kind of the realization of a dream for a family that has owned real estate in the area for 100 years and spend a bunch of money to do whatever we can to reactivate an area of Oklahoma City that candidly has been completely dead, and this is just another step in that.
Yeah, and the effort and the initiative is undeniable and very much appreciated. I mean, I spent time here, and I think it's a great addition to Oklahoma City and the West Side. Susan, could we provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission to watch the record of this meeting? I mean, is that...
I think you need to just make a recommendation.
Typically, staff sends an email to subdivision and zoning staff because they do the Planning Commission meeting and let them know what happened.
Okay.
So, we give them the actual, this is what they said they were going to do, and here's the conditions, that type of thing. So,
Can we add a condition for an easement for a public path connecting Sheridan and Main?
You can make that as a recommendation.
Sure.
I would like to see that.
I am also...
We welcome that.
Yeah. I love those streetscapes where there's a lot of activity between the buildings and stuff. Something interesting is going on. And my office is like right across the street from this whole thing, so I drive by there every day. But yeah, I just want to make sure that people can continue to...
And we welcome conditions like that, and certainly will work through the process with the City Council and the Municipal Council's office to effectuate ways to protect through easements all these things that you're expressing concerns about. We welcome that.
Okay, and I'm going to make my last comment then. I'm not concerned about activity on there. I believe everything you say, Clay. And my concern, again, is it's not as unique as you guys feel it is, and it's a situation that we could be facing in the future about giving, public property to private organizations when that's sort of a way to get around a problem of how difficult it is to get activities approved in the city. I don't like this, as I still think it's going to set a precedent that's going to come back to bite us later. And that is our role here. And so I'm totally in support of everything you guys have done and are doing. That's my concern, is that I don't think it's quite as unique as you believe it to be. And so that's my concern.
Of course.
The way this is unfolding is that instances like this, be they unique or not, they'll be resolved on a case-by-case basis. As opposed to if we had a citywide ordinance, there'd be ultimately one size fits all. And there can be different classifications, but this kind of intense examination will occur with respect to future instances where this is proposed. And those that are worthy, you'll recommend for approval. And those that are not worthy, you will not recommend for approval. But it'll be very specialized in the analysis that takes place, and an individualized solution will be developed for it. That's what I wanted to share.
I understand, but Corey made a comment where he said, is it necessary? And no, I don't think it's necessary in this case. And that's my concern. There are ways to get it done. It's not easy. I'd like to see that process changed for everybody that is taking a risk like you guys are doing. That's my concern, though. I come down to that word necessary. Is it? No, I don't think it is.
I've been listening to the discussion and the debate, and I haven't weighed in because my hope is that we just wouldn't take any action. I just believe that the Planning Commission and Municipal Council's office are going to weigh all these issues, and there are other factors that are above the requirements based on why this group exists, and I just prefer to punt it and let them deal with those other issues. So that's my thought.
Well, from a technical standpoint, you know, if what we're weighing right now is a closure of the street, I'm not opposed to that, because that will allow more bodies to review this and vet this process out. Because we're not deciding on the vacation of the street in this committee and in this meeting, that's a juggle that I'm dealing with right now. Because, I mean, if we're talking simply about closing the street, which can be revoked, am I correct, could be revoked at any time and we're back to status quo, I don't have an issue with that. But I do like Deborah, the other condition that you've added about pedestrian access, just to make sure that gets on record and everyone else is aware of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would even like to see the street full of like art and lights and all these kinds of things that you can't do on standard streets. So I think the potential is there to make this a really interesting location. Okay, so I'm going to, I guess, provide a recommendation for approval with the easement for a public path between
So the staff report had included some
I'm going to include all of these.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, with the addition of this one.
Okay.
All right.
So do we have a motion?
Yeah, so I'll provide a motion. Okay. I provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission for the request to close North Fred Jones Avenue between West Main Street and West Sheridan Ave, and to close a portion of the alleyway between West Main Street, North Fred Jones Ave, West Sheridan Ave, and North Chartel Ave, with the conditions that easements be granted by the adjoining landowners to the city for access and operation of emergency vehicle and waste collection, such as city utilities, water, wastewater, drainage, and storm sewer systems. Also, easements be granted by the adjoining landowners for other utilities, such as OG&E and ONG. Also, easements be granted by the adjoining landowners to nearby property owners so that they can continue to use the street and the alleys. And D, also, there will be an easement for a public path between West Main Street and North Chartel Ave.
Just to clarify on that, between...
West...
Sheridan?
Oh, sorry, between Sheridan and...
Main Street?
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
The easement for the public path is between Sheridan and Main Street.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Unless we receive a second to that motion, that motion would potentially not hold, and we would be looking for another motion.
Can't the chair second a motion?
No.
Robert says they can.
I might have to defer to our legal, because
Yeah, I don't know, I didn't bring my Robert's rules. I think you can second.
I can?
Yeah, you just can't make a motion.
I will second that motion. So that was a Richards-Bates motion. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
can you put your hand up if you're voting aye?
If you vote aye.
Okay, thank you,
All those opposed?
thank you.
So the motion is denied, or, right? And is that,
Can I make a motion that we make a recommendation of no action, since we're sort of split, going back to Gary's idea?
Second?
The first motion failed, it just didn't pass.
okay,
I don't know that it was denied, it just was not
it
approved.
was not approved. So now we have a new motion, a Kriegel-Jones motion, and that is to, I'm sorry.
Recommendation no action.
Okay, recommendation.
Opposed to denial because we are split.
So that is a Kriegel-Jones motion. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Thank you.
All opposed?
Okay, so it's 5-1 with Deborah was the one, okay.
So that motion is approved.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I'd like to just say thank you all for your time and your effort with this project, with this process. We do really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so we have one more item on other business, item 7B, 15 Southwest 4th Street.
And we're going to pause for just a second.
Yes, sorry, I forgot.
So this is another closure which is slightly different. 2 months ago, you had the parking garage before you, and this didn't come up. There's a couple of ordinances, one from 1909, I think, and the other one from the mid-20s, and apparently that didn't get the job done to close/vacate this alley that was never physically in place. So this causes a problem with the parking garage project that you saw recently, and so this is coming before you. Staff recommended approval of it. As I said, the alley was never in place at all. And the alley physically was only platted the direction you've got there because the rest of that block where the buildings were actually physically in another subdivision, so they had a different alley that was vacated previously. So staff is recommending approval of this one, especially since we recently approved the project that needs to get built across this.
Is the applicant present?
This, I would say no, this kind of became a staff, not us, but it kind of came to us from other city staff in another department, which I'm sure is why they're not here. So if you have any questions, I will attempt to answer it. This is more in keeping with the normal closures you see, because they're not physically in when you get a request to close them.
And this is just the alley?
This is just the alley.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission for the request to close a portion of the alleyway between E.K. Gaylord and South Bradway Avenue.
I'll second.
That was a Jones-Trujillo motion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So that motion is approved.
Thank you.
All right,
I wonder if the body would entertain a motion to reconsider the item in which I'm interested based on the precedent that you just set.
That's what I clarified. That one was more in keeping with the ones you normally get, that it's physically not in, and it was for an alley in conjunction with a project you had already approved 2 months ago.
This is clearly something that is not the same as the last one. It is an alley that has never been opened. There was a very small portion. It was not a public street that's being opened, so
Well, first,
I don't think there's any precedent there.
well, it's a precedent for closing alleys. Now, that alley that you just closed needs to be closed. That's an essential facility for the Omni Hotel. You did exactly the right thing, but all alley closings are not necessarily bad, and our alley closing brings about a people place. So the question is whether you get to decide whether you wish to reconsider. So I understand that, but I thought I'd bring that to your attention.
Yes, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay, so moving on to Section 8, Communications. We've got a number of projects on the Administrative Approval Report. Are there any comments from staff?
On the administrative approval report, no. If you have questions, I can answer them. If you don't have questions, what I will say is, yes, you have a meeting next month. We've already sat down and divvied up the projects among the three of us. So if you can please put it on your calendar in ink. If anybody else has an issue, let me know, because we'll need to start counting heads to make sure we have a quorum for that meeting.
I have an issue too.
Okay.
I didn't realize I'm out of town.
Okay, no problem. You'll be getting an email probably in the next few days so we can count heads and make sure we have the 4. Because if we don't, we need to go ahead and schedule a special meeting so we don't delay the projects.
Are there any other comments from committee members? So as mentioned, we have a meeting next month, Thursday, July 18th, 2019. New applications were to be submitted by 4 p.m. Tuesday, June 18th, and revisions and information on continued projects submitted by June 25th. Meeting is adjourned.